Welcome back to Talking Elvis as we continue with the Memphis Chronicles series. Humes High School was built in 1925, and in 1992, 34 years ago, I enjoyed a tour of the school, which included the auditorium and also Elvis's classroom.
I could wonder if a byway but it wouldn't be the same without
The parents from the years of 1948 to 1953. Most of that time, Elvis' family lived at 462 Alabama Street in the apartment complex about 8 blocks from the school. He walked to school most of the time, but he did drive some during his senior year. He majored in shopping and participated in the ROTC, which he enjoyed very much. He was an average student that's remembered by his teachers and classmates as a shy person who always stayed in the background. He was very polite and didn't cause any trouble.
Elvis was in 8th grade at Milam School in Tupelo. He started there in September of 1948. On the 6th of November, the family moved to Memphis, Tennessee. And just 2 days later, on the 8th of November, Elvis Aaron, with 2 A's, Presley, is enrolled into the 8th grade at Humes High School. Just like me, I am sure that you remember your first day of school. Bit of a nightmare it was. Elvis was no different. Vernon recalled later, after walking him to school that day, he soon returned home all bug-eyed. At this time, they're living in the apartment on 370 Washington Street. On the 20th of September 1949, the family moved into their apartment at Lauderdale Course. In his first year at school, Elvis is never late and attends for 165 days, being absent for a total of 15. He receives an A in language, a B in spelling, history and PE. He gets C's in music, arithmetic and science. In September 1950, while in the 10th grade, Elvis enrolls into the ROTC. And in the same month, he receives his Social Security card. The Aaron has 1A. And during this month, he starts working at Los State Theatre on Main Street. While still at school in June 1951, Elvis starts a summer job at the Precision Tool Company. His uncle, Gladys's brother Travis, works there, and Elvis is making $27 a week. In September that year, he starts his junior year, and both friends and teachers start noticing that Elvis is beginning to change a little bit. He's becoming more self-confident, starts really dressing differently, and tries to grow sideburns. The rumor has always been that while he was in junior year, Elvis tried out for the school football team and didn't get in, apparently because of the way that he looked. That is not the story according to Coach Malcolm Phillips. He was an assistant to the head coach, Ruby Boyce. Elvis did in fact play lineman for the Tigers, believed to be in the spring of 1952. It was Elvis that quit, and he told the coach he was leaving the team because he wanted to get an evening job to help out his parents. In November, Elvis takes his driving test using his uncle Travis's Buick, 1940 Buick. It is generally accepted that in the main, Elvis kept himself to himself. And again, just like us, I'm sure he had several acquaintances. There are 2 notable friends from school that would remain friends going forward. They would grow up to be middle-aged men together. Bobby, Red West, and George Klein. But his closest friends at that time were in Lauderdale Courts. Luther Nall was one of them. This is him with Elvis here. He, in fact, lived on the same level as the Presleys. Their apartments touched each other at the back. Luther and Elvis would skip school together, and while they were in the 11th grade, they jumped on a bus and went swimming in Wolf River, only later to be reprimanded when arriving home to find out that their parents knew that they had skipped school. The school principal at school was Mr. Brindley, and it appears that this would be the one and only time that Elvis would receive the school paddle. Luther now remembers Elvis being very sensitive and a very compassionate person, but he also says he was an individual, no doubt about that. They would actually work together at Lowe's State Theatre. His close friend, and arguably his closest at this time, was Evan Forbes, better known as Buzzy. The two of them, along with Paul Doher and Farley Guy, were known as the Rat Pack of Lauderdale Courts. They were almost always together, and how nice it is that we have a photograph of them all. There was an area at the north side of the Lauderdale Courts which was shaped like a pie, more specifically a piece of pie, and they called it the Triangle. Buzzy Forbes recalls that when Elvis bought the two-door Lincoln while he was in 11th grade, which would make Elvis 17 years old in 1952, and incidentally coincides with what I had thought and said in my first video about Elvis's cars. Elvis did in fact receive that car prior to his 18th birthday, late spring, early summer of 1952. Farley Guy and his family lived right above the Presleys. He would later say, so many people say that they were friends with Elvis at that time, but really it was only the four of us. The first time he met Elvis, he had just moved in, and Elvis and Paul Doher were playing baseball. He said, I just started talking to them. Elvis didn't say very much at first, but it didn't take long to become close friends. We were the same age, and we became a very tight group. We did not like mixing with strangers and always hung out together. We loved to play baseball, loved the Johnny Weissmuller Tarzan movies, and we'd play pool at Oddfellows or go to swim at the Malone pool. He recalls that sometimes we would just sit and listen to Elvis sing and play his guitar at the Triangle. Elvis and Farley would keep in touch after school. Farley Guy would go to visit Elvis at Audubon Drive, and in fact spent a week at Graceland. And although he always felt that Elvis would have given him a job had he wanted one, he felt like he was imposing, and he just drifted away. When asked about the story of Elvis being bullied at school, and the one we're all familiar with of Red West stepping in when some guys were going to cut Elvis's hair in the bathroom, he says he does not remember that at all. In fact, he says the only bully at Humes High School was Red West. I've no reason to believe that this didn't happen and Red didn't step in, but I did think it was interesting that he didn't recall it happening. He says Elvis was a scraper and that he could stand his own ground. Going back to the Lincoln, Luther Nall was with Elvis when they found the car in an old junkyard. They wanted $35 for it. Elvis went to Vernon, and somehow Vernon got the money together and they bought the car. He recalls that Elvis loved singing, and his big dream at the time was to sing on the radio. He says they went everywhere in that Lincoln, even to Tupelo, because Elvis wanted to show him where he was born. He said he was scared to death, and the car was a death trap. Luther Nall would visit Elvis after he had moved to Audubon Drive. However, once school had finished, Again, like many of us, things were never really quite the same. They would eventually go their separate ways. Buzzy Forbes would double date with Elvis. They would drive Elvis's Lincoln over the Mississippi Bridge into West Memphis, and he recalls, "We used that car a lot." After leaving the Lowe's State Theatre in April 1952, Elvis goes back, but this time the job only lasts for 5 weeks because he gets into an altercation with another usher. Elvis is 17 years old and having to be 18 to work at the upholstery specialty company, he puts 1934 as his birth year on the application form. He gets the job, but is only there for 1 month. In September, he begins working at Marl Metal Products. They make furniture. The hours are 3 p.m. until 11 p.m. and during this time the teachers at school start to notice that Elvis is falling asleep in class. According to Gladys, "We made him quit." In November, the family are evicted from Lauderdale Courts and they would move to Alabama Street. On the 19th of January 1953, Elvis registers for selective service, and on April the 9th, he enters the Humes High School annual minstrel show. Buzzy Forbes remembers that he had a nice flannel shirt. It was red with white buttons, and Elvis asked if he could borrow it for his performance. He took the stage and sang "Till I Waltz With You Again," a song recorded by Teresa Brewer.
Till I waltz again with you, let no other hold your charms. If my dreams should all come true, you'll be waiting for my arms. Till I kiss you once again, keep my love locked in your heart. Darling, I'll return and then we will never have to part.
Elvis would later say it was amazing how popular he became at school after that. By the time Elvis finished his senior year, he was getting all C's. What about girlfriends? There were a few, not that many. Georgia, I'll try to pronounce her name, Georgia Sakramontos was Greek. Of Greek origin, she wasn't able to date anybody outside of her religion. She and Elvis were in many school classes together, and she recalled that Elvis used to crumple up the paper from chewing gum wrappers and throw it at her in the classroom to get her attention. He would often walk her home from school, and she considered their relationship to be very close. There was also Dolly Dean and Margie Garrison. But then there was also Billy Wardlaw. They dated for over 1 year, and she was the one that broke the relationship off. And I believe it's Billy Wardlaw that Elvis is talking about when he refers to having a girlfriend at school and where he thought that she was maybe the one. Later, Wardlaw would recall that Elvis was a great kisser, and whenever we were playing Spin the Bottle, I always wanted the bottle to land on him. There was also Regis Wilson. They dated from February until May 1953, and it was Regis that Elvis took to his school prom. Elvis's last day of school was in May 1953, and on the 3rd of June at the Ellis Auditorium, Elvis receives his high school diploma. the first member of his immediate family to graduate from high school. Back in 1989, Elvis author Bill Burke was told by a former teacher that in fact Elvis didn't graduate from school, and what he had was an honorary diploma which was given to him before he went into the army. I do think that this can be ruled out, as Buzzy Forbes says that both he and Elvis graduated on the same day, and they were both at the ceremony. Elvis, Aaron with 2 A's, was registered at Hume's, but the diploma has 1 A. It is now proudly displayed at Graceland. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe.